Hey everybody, welcome back again. Um, it's only just Friday we just last spoke, so here we go again. So I got just about everybody's papers in. Two people were missing, messages were sent to them. But everybody, you all should have gotten your papers back. I do it through traditional old email, so that's why I asked for everybody's email address. So you should have gotten that back. And as I said, now you have a rewrite that's doing that. I made that deadline a little bit earlier than I first expected to, largely because I want to give everybody essentially about a week to do that rewrite. And most of you actually got the rewrite, they got the first draft, the edited first grade first draft on Friday night, and then we're going into Saturday. So you have until this coming Friday, June 10th, to submit the rewrite, and there is actually a rewrite entry for that. Okay, so I will talk about that, but I just want to make sure we go over like what's due first. All right. So anyway, I'll go over like what I expect from that. I was actually rather impressed with what I saw initially. So from you guys. So all right, let me share the screen here. I'm actually filming this on Saturday, so when I talk about things, I'm actually talking about as if you're watching this on Monday. So when I say things like today, I mean Monday. Okay, this is actually this is going to be posted on Monday morning. The link to this video will be right here. So by end of today, meaning Monday, the second assignment is due. Okay, so that again is the leads assignment. And for that, again, I really need you to write the leads, basically full sentences. I need you to pick out what you think is the most interesting or unique aspect of this batch of information here, this batch of information here. Look for what's new, look for what's interesting, look for what's unique, okay? But also, again, write full sentences. I have people who will they'll write like these headlines, okay? Headlines are like a whole different form. It's actually called headlinees, okay? And you'll see that actually, if I show you right here, they're written in a different way from the mass shootings. Let's see here. Mariachi's ride into Uvalde with songs of heartache. So they're kind of written in like a present tense, okay? And they're written in kind of a compartmentalized way so that like words like and the are taken out, okay? So that's not what I want. What I want is actually the lead. The lead would be what would be the first sentence in this paragraph. I mean, this is actually what they call an anecdotal lead, so it's actually going to kind of take a long time to get to what the story is about. But I'm looking for something that actually is more along the lines of this. That's not it really either. I'm sorry. Actually, let me just go to right here. 4 key gun control proposals are now being considered in Congress. Might have changed the course of 35 mass shootings had they been lost since 1999. Okay, so it's like a full sentence with a verb and the and everything. Okay, so that's what I want out of that. Okay. All right. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to extend into the whole idea of like what I expect in a news story, but really today, and we're going to look at what the chapters are connected to that. But what you have to keep in mind is that news reporters are actually like self-starters. They have to come up with their own ideas essentially, and that's a good thing because then they can be wedded to that idea and they can kind of develop that idea on their own. Okay, they can even have like a certain passion for that idea. So what I want you guys to do for the next assignment is to actually come up, okay, with 5 ideas. Now, I realize that some of you are not living at Rutgers. You're far away from Rutgers, that sort of thing. But what I want you guys to do essentially is to come up with 5 ideas for what would be a good news story, and it'd be Rutgers related, okay? This is something that actually, again, I'm taping this on Saturday, but it'll be posted by Monday. Being a journalist means being a self-starter. That means being independent and coming up with their own ideas. It also will help if you understand the importance of finding a unique angle on the story. Please come up with 5 story ideas that are Rutgers related and submit to this assignment entry, this one right here, by Thursday, July 9th. So that's your next assignment, is to do that Thursday, July 9th. So you have that due on Thursday, July 9th, and then you have the rewrite due for the profile assignment due on Thursday, June 10th, okay? All right, so that's what's due right now, okay? The best idea will be your next graded assignment, and I'm gonna choose that. And I will choose the best idea, and that person will get extra credit, a grade higher on their next assignment. Oh boy, so you actually get some sort of benefit here. There's some sort of competition here. I'm looking for a story that actually, it's not just the best idea, but the most suitable idea. I'm not looking for like major investigations here or anything like that, or like investigations into the campus food or whatever. Or I'm just looking, keep the idea simple. I mean, most ideas are simple. Okay, they are a lead, the story, the theme of the story. So just basically just think of something like that. Think of something that basically affects students. A lot of times it's actually a good idea just to get like an idea that something involving Rutgers University and get like a reaction to it, okay? I gotta tell you, like, maybe straying away from like one idea a little bit, and that's COVID. Okay, I feel like I kind of did that one to the point of extreme over the last few years. So maybe try to shy away from that unless you can find some sort of unique angle with that. But I was picking that idea almost. I've done this assignment before, as you probably would expect. I was picking anything COVID related for the longest time, but actually last semester I did not. So like I don't want any undercover stories in Broward Commons or anything like that. Just something that's simple, like I've been asking for in these stories, simple and focused, and something that can be done within ultimately the assignment you're going to do is you're going to have about 6 days to do it. So about a week. Okay. All right. And stories are about people. So theme your ideas about like reactions. It's a big hint there, like maybe reactions to something that's going on in campus or something. So something that will also, since a lot of you live far away, something also maybe doesn't require to interview like things like bus drivers or even like faculty or something like that, or I'd probably be a little bit easier, but administrators, stuff like that. Just like stick with students. And what I typically do is for this assignment is actually I post a discussion point that gives people an opportunity to actually like use that information. And I asked you guys actually to participate and put your source hats on. All right. And then that will provide the information for the assignment. Okay. So that again is due on Thursday. Okay. All right. So no details for that, who won and that sort of thing, the idea and that sort of thing will be, I'll talk about in my Friday lecture. Okay. Again, the rewrite. All right. Again, for the rewrite now, again, nobody got an A on this assignment, which is fine. It's only the first draft. I expect actually people to get A's out of this assignment. So, but everyone can rewrite this assignment. So if you got a B plus or a B or whatever, you can rewrite it. If you got an R, you must rewrite it actually, or otherwise you get an F. Okay. So, all right. So there were actually probably about half non-Rs, half Rs. That R again is, actually what I should do is I should talk to you about essentially what I would call the rubric for this assignment. Okay. We all know about rubrics, right? All right. So I will actually make sure that I also talk about for grading. Okay. And I will be grading also this lead assignment the same way. I'll be looking at it the same way, looking for accuracy, clarity, and focus. Okay. So actually, if you actually go to the modules, where we actually keep track of like what is going on with our class, you see this was this past week. We talked about the writing basics. Okay. We learned about the 7 types of documents, print news stories, data journalism story. I showed you guys a little bit about this, like between essentially like a Titanic and how things were covered with the moon landing. Okay. But now in week 2, we have the rubric and grading. Okay. And anyway, so here's how I break down things essentially. Okay. So A essentially is anything that essentially is publishable, okay? But I'm not talking about necessarily New York Times publishable, like top ranked newspaper or something like that. You know, something that maybe be like Patch or something as a local news organization I used to help run in New Jersey. And it's very simple writing. The Targum, which is the campus newspaper, your local newspaper, is something that's actually is very accurate, clear, and focused. Something that's very simple and very direct with people. Okay, story is single theme and specific with very few mistakes. Okay, so it's very hard to like necessarily strike that right on the first get go on the first draft. Okay, so don't feel down if you don't get that right away. Okay, like I said, this is a class that grades on progress, so we start small and go big. Okay, we start by basically learning the actual craft, and then by the end of the semester, I expect you to know the craft, and that's when the grades count more. Okay, B plus essentially is publishable and understandable. I say understandable, it's like maybe a little bit of a harsh word, but basically that means I understand, even if you maybe like the writing is like not clear enough, that sort of thing. I have a general understanding of what you're trying to get across from top of the story to the bottom. Maybe there just needs some improvement in organization, that sort of thing. Okay, it's accurate, it's clear, it's focused, but maybe it requires some editing in terms of maybe the clarity. Maybe there's some sentences that are awkward. There's really no problems with accuracy yet. If you get problems with accuracy, it's definitely not going to be an A or a B. Okay, right off the bat at least. Okay, you got to get things, make sure things are right. Okay, B is actually that a little bit more a little more editing, or like more editing, I would say, than B plus is like some editing in terms of clarity and focus. B has more substantial editing. Okay, the C plus line is that's where maybe like potentially publishable and understandable. I can understand what the story's about, but this is where I typically fall under the line of like maybe the story's a bit disorganized. Okay, things have to be moved around, and I'll show you a couple of examples where that typically happens. Okay, because a news story is almost like a puzzle, and the puzzles have to fit. And basically, what you have to do is you have to make sure that when you actually write the story, that the new stuff is at the top of the new and unique stuff is at the top of the story. Most new and unique stuff is at the top of the story. Okay, and sometimes I'll actually read a story and I'll say like, oh well, at least like from the top of the story I can understand what the story is about, but there was like pieces of it that were kind of like I'm looking for a continuation of like the theme, like who answering the questions, who, what, why, where, when, and they're not really answering those questions right away or at all. So that's like an organizational issue more than anything. Okay. C plus, that's essentially a C plus. C is that maybe more substantial editing. I don't usually typically give again a D or F's in the first draft. Okay, but I give out an R, and basically it's not publishable, not really clearly understandable. I don't really know what the structure is all about. It lacks clarity, lacks focus. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about that. And here's how the grading breakdown works. I'm actually probably gonna have 6 assignments in this class. So this is how it would work typically with 7 assignments. So just imagine that this were 6. Okay, so basically we have our first assignment. Basically, these first, like, this will actually be the first 4. And what I should actually do is I should actually like change this. Apologize for this. Because actually, let's see. So actually, like, let's say, let's take out major assignment. Actually, I'll probably break down to more like this. So the first 4 assignments will count once. Okay, meaning I'll just count one time. Okay, and then the 5th assignment will count actually twice as much as each of the first. Okay, and then the last one, the major assignment, will count 4 times as much. Okay, so basically how it works out is like your first 4 assignments, they'll be 11%, 11%, 11%. This is of the writing grade, which is 70% of the overall grade. Okay, 11%, and then 22% will be the 5th assignment, which actually will be a feature assignment, which we'll get into. And your major assignment, which will be a more substantial assignment, that will be 44% of your writing grade. So basically your last 2 assignments actually will count more than half of your of your writing grade. Okay, but I mean, right now obviously things still do count a lot. Okay, so just make sure you know that. Okay, well, let me show you a little bit about the grading here. Okay, This is the perfect example of like of a story. I mean, it was actually written well, but I feel like it was not. But I feel like it was not clearly understandable what the story was about. Okay, from top to bottom. Okay, and it was more. It was disorganization issues. There's organization issues with this story, but from the lead is the most important paragraph of the story, and I didn't really quite understand like what this story was about from the top. And also, to be honest with you, it was a pretty benign top. It was pretty not very interesting, not very unusual. It was something that basically can happen to everybody. Nestor Valencia is accustomed to facing high expectations from family, friends, peers, educators, most importantly himself. Well, I mean, that is interesting to know, but I mean, how many people can we talk about? It's not very unique. That's something we could probably say this about anybody, ourselves or whatever. Even if we're not valedictorian, we have high expectations. Many parents have high expectations of their students. Okay, I mean, of their children, that sort of thing. High school valedictorian with acceptance letter at Johns Hopkins. Education was the forefront of his education. He had constant praise. I talked to him about it. This is actually something that you should know, by the way. A couple of things to pick out about the writing that I saw a lot is that this is an AP style issue. Okay, going a little bit off track here. It's last name on second reference and future reference. Okay, so just know that. The only time it doesn't happen is when it typically isn't. This is done with like kids who are like 5, 6, 7 years old. It just sounds funny calling like some kid Valencia when he's like 5 years old. But the AP style actually calls for a last name on second reference. Okay. All right. Another thing that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the coming weeks is attribution. I saw people actually footnote like a research paper. No, we don't do footnotes in news stories. We actually do a he said, she said, or they said. Okay. Whatever the pronoun is. Okay. Um, so anyway, he said, she said, they said. You want to make sure that people have an idea where this information came from, if it's an opinion or a little known fact to a source. So basically, if this stuff is happening to Nestor Valencia, it's probably a fact, but it's probably something that's little known. Okay. What I always tell people is that what's the difference between essentially a a a a something that's a little known fact and a well known fact? Well, you know, President Biden was vice president. Okay, so that's a very well known fact. It doesn't need attribution. Okay. But something that's maybe like something that's like what happens within behind the White House doors. Knew the Afghanistan pullout would not go well. I mean, not everybody knows that, okay? And we don't even know that to this day. We don't necessarily know that, okay? So maybe you would say like, I don't know, it's probably something not everybody would know. So I'm saying probably require a sources said. Maybe it would be something that maybe Kamala Harris would reveal. Harris said. So that's something that would basically, be require attribution because it's not something that not everybody would know. Okay. So you want to make sure that everything not, you try to maybe get like attribution like one per graph. Okay. Make sure there's something there basically signifies that it came from somewhere. Okay. So again, like there's more about like, how Nestor Valencia, I couldn't figure out what he was going to do, blah, blah, blah. It seems to go on and on and on. I told him, I don't know what's new or unique here. Okay. And it didn't really come to here where I felt like here we had somebody who basically has an interesting job, that not everybody has. A team lead, okay, after becoming a cell processing associate and involving at Novartis, which is actually a company that my son actually helped audit for Price Waterhouse. Anyway, not everybody does this. This is actually interesting itself. So I said to him, the writer of the story, this is actually the story right here. I mean, yeah, you mean we could tie in the idea that like, that this is not a job that he expected to have. That actually makes it a more interesting story. That it's this kind of unique, interesting job. And it's not one that he had ultimately expected to get, but it's almost, this story should actually work in reverse. This is actually the most important part of the story. Okay. And the fact that, each bag has a patient's label and name on it. This is like how many people actually could say that they know people who do this kind of stuff. You know, basically help saving people with disease research and cell research and stuff like that. You know, um, and then like we talk about that job and we talk about what it entails, and that's interesting and new and unique. And then we can get into this stuff about like you know how he was a valedictorian and he didn't really find out his way, and he found his way toward this. Okay. So basically what we found here was that the story was really down at the bottom. And that's what this is a story actually where I felt like it was an R because I felt like it wasn't clearly understandable what this story should be about or what it was about from the top down to the bottom. Okay. Here's a story where I thought I knew where she was like going to put somebody's name on this one. Miss Hamza, good job. This actually was the highest grade in the class. Dylan Mackin, a new graduate, I should say a new graduate actually. Sorry. At NJIT, actually really spell these out. Typically, class of 2002, obtained a bachelor's degree in engineering among this class, and landed a job at FM Global weeks after graduation. So that's actually like the kind of the opposite of the story we just saw. We actually like learned about an interesting, unique job from the top, you know, and then it goes into details. Mackin provided insight as he managed to secure a position as field engineer in such a competitive field, while showcasing his character in the work environments. Okay. The job focused heavily on personality and be able to talk to people, which many graduates struggle. See, it's all about the job. Okay. You know, you know, he stays focused with several experiences from internships in the past, basically what helps him move on the job. Has prepared himself for the moment, walk down the aisle. He's been doing this for learning how to get himself involved in this job from the time he got from graduation. He meets with companies. You know, one of the things he does is deals with company standards and facility standards and make sure they're met. You know, it's about so again, this is actually like not a job that everybody does. Okay. Not only does one have to think about real problems, but he has his high stress level in this. Okay. It's not a typical engineer, but you know, he has to use interpersonal skills, job, all staying focused on that. Okay. All right. So that's a story that worked well. Okay. Here's a story I got a B, a story about a power lifter. You know, there was actually like, you know, why this get a B because I clearly understood what the story was about at the top, power lifter, that sort of thing. But there was some stuff I thought that was a little bit low in the story. And again, it was about the job and what he does. We kind of went into first a little bit into the background and how he got there. I felt like that actually like this actually was about the job and actually him competing in the nationals. I'm sorry. So you know, this is what he does, but this is what he's aiming for. And I thought we kind of went a little bit too much into background first. Background is actually like the least important part of the story. Actually, what you want to do is you want to actually get to the stuff about the competition, what's happening now first. And I felt like this was a little bit low in the story. He's very excited to compete in the nationals. First time competing on the national level. It's actually his last name, so this is correct. So I felt like this stuff I needed to be moved up. Okay. So basically, I mean, what you want to do is, and again, this is like, and I have this when I put this up in the module section, I've shown you guys actually what I feel is the actual news writing structure. And you'll see this actually again, like actually as we go into, this is actually news writing structure for what's, you know, the story. But again, you have a lead. It starts with a lead, and this is basically how getting more, a little bit more detailed how the structure should work. The lead identifies what the story should be about, why you should care. So basically, we have stories about people with jobs. I want to know what that job is and what makes it unique. And then you have your things that break into transitions, break down the lead. First point, back up your theme, your overall theme. Okay. Then you have essentially like an anecdote that maybe breaks down things into a little bit more, like basically a story within a story. You know, if you have a story about a job, we talk about what they do, we'll show them, give me a little example of maybe something they do like while they're on the job. Okay. All right. And that breaks the story down even more. And a quote will actually provide color to illuminate your first point. And I saw a lot of long, really long quotes. It's really much better to actually paraphrase more often than actually to then actually to go like just put everything in a quote, because people tend to not read long quotes or even the quotes at all. They tend to skip over them. Quotes are intended to really try to be colorful and like provide like a quip and humanize a story. But your writing actually is much more of paraphrasing more than anything else. You're supposed to again interpret what people say. You listen, you internalize, you write, and you summarize. Okay. Then you go on to the next point, which is actually like your next transition, maybe another thing about the job that might be interesting to know. Okay. Let me break this down a little bit more specifically. And then you get into the background and you talk about what led up to essentially the job. Okay. So it basically kind of works like this. Okay. So you have a lead, you know, so and so does great, not great, but so does self research job. Okay. All right. And then you have a transition, basically breaks down the detail. Okay. So, so and so discovered, not quite this, a cure for cancer or something like that. Okay. And that helped. I mean, maybe that's a little bit over the top, but maybe so and so, you know, basically works 24 hours. I can't even tell you what cell research would do, but basically like breaking apart cells. I'll just say something like that. Okay, that's maybe like one example. What does he do? Who, what, where, why, when? What does he do? Okay. And then maybe you provide an anecdote. Okay, like that's just a little story where the story will break things into even smaller detail. So and so spent one day last month looking through a microscope and seeing cells divide. Others watched and were impressed. So we get into even smaller, more granular detail, okay? With the anecdote, a story within a story that kind of highlights, illuminates the larger story, okay? And then we get into essentially maybe you get a quote in here, okay? Okay, and then a quote again should only be like maybe a sentence long or something like that. It was, I mean, colorful, maybe like something that sticks out, maybe shows emotion. It's one of the most amazing experiences of my life, he said. Okay, indent. Okay, and then the transition breaks it down with another point. You know, so and so is doing this job 24 hours a day. So what does this job entail? Again, more of answering that question, and doesn't have much of a life outside, you know, that sort of thing of it. Okay, so you rinse, repeat, you go back to another anecdote. He comes home late at night, tosses the keys on his dresser and falls into his bed. Okay. All right. So there's a constant flow about the job, but it kind of breaks into parts that basically provide different aspects of that job. Okay. All right. So that's that. All right. I'm just kind of going over like what I'm also have to talk to you about. Talk to you about attribution. Okay, you're also going to get these papers back from Corinne, so let's just know that too. That's going to come within the next couple of days, I hope. So you know, if you haven't gotten already. So and that'll be focusing more on the grammar and the news style. And then remember, you have to read the Associated Press style book too. Okay, so that's another thing too. All right, story idea. Talked about that. Details on that. Okay, so what's next? All right, so. Of course, this class is also, we have reading assignments too. So your next reading assignment, which is due this week, is chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10. Again, which get more into the news writing structure of things. Let's go to the chapter 7, which actually, some of this actually is going to be stuff we've covered already. Basic news leads. Again, I spell it a little bit differently. I spell it like this, L-E-D-E, okay. but it could be either way. But this is actually a way of kind of differentiating from the other kind of lead. Okay. So, basically, like when you're actually like, a lot of times you're actually trying to do an interview or something like that, you want to actually, they talk about like trying to pre-write. So I talked the last lecture about how it's important to maybe like have some sort of idea, like what the structure of the story is going to be before you even interview the people you need to interview. Okay. So that's actually essentially called pre-writing. Okay. So maybe you provide some sort of an outline, and through that, you might actually even get a general idea what the lead should be. Okay. So, you want to like, but a lot of times actually that actual lead will not really come until you actually get the information from the interview. Okay. Or you a lot of times it may even just hit you, as I described in my last news story, or my lecture. It might hit you while you're actually doing the interviewing. Okay. Um, this actually talks about, it kind of goes a little bit awry, some of this stuff. You can go into digital stuff and video, stuff like that. But I'm really kind of just dealing with the writing it and things more than anything. It talks about the different types of leads, like a summary news lead. That's where maybe like you basically just sum up everything you expect in the story. It's not something necessarily is something that's showy, something like that. But the first paragraph to a news story is called a lead, also spelled lead. It's the most important part of the story. And again, it tries to sum up as many of these questions as possible: who, what, where, why, when. Okay. All right. So anyway, but it doesn't necessarily answer all those questions. Okay. Leads in the basic questions. Here are the basic questions. Okay. Warren Buffett is something I deal with a lot because he deals with insurance. Is nearing a deal to buy one of the country's biggest power transmission companies, which would cement electricity as one of the conglomerate's largest businesses. Okay. All right. So then it kind of, and then basically the rest of the story kind of answers these questions more or in depth, or, because sometimes you can't even answer all these questions all at once. Okay. In the lead. So you have to get into more detail as things go along. Okay. All right. So, I mean, this provides certain examples of like how to get to that. Okay. All right. This shows the difference between essentially a headline and a lead. Okay. Headline: Microsoft begins latest layoffs. Again, it's like just basically begins is like written in present tense, just headlineese. There's a lot of words are actually cut off, but then the lead actually is a sentence. Okay. Okay. Microsoft has started cutting thousands of positions, mostly in its sales department, days after announcing it would shift its sales strategy to focus more on cloud services. Okay. Basically, just telling you what the news is directly. Basically, probably one of the best examples I should provide, and this is actually my Twitter right here, is to look at like a tweet, and this is my Twitter account. Okay. Yeah, I know I put up Wordle. I'm so important. So anyway, I like the Mets. But basically, probably along the lines of like, basically what the news stories basically provide. Okay. I mean, sorry, the newspapers provide. Okay. And we got here, I'm trying to actually look for some news organizations here. We have Jake Tapper doing Twitter. That's John McCain's son right there. Kick back with the newest hits, called classics. Yeah, that's HBO Max. But basically, they're like along the lines of basically providing, one sentence, like quick quips of what's going on. Okay. And New York Times does that essentially. President Biden was briefly evacuated. I didn't know about this, from his beach home in Delaware after a small private plane accidentally flew into restricted airspace. So you actually will see the lead essentially pop up essentially on your Twitter feed. Okay. All right. I don't like to dwell a lot on the book. Okay. But, I want to, there's some hints to like, you want to try to be as specific as possible. Is actually, like I was telling you before, it's not so much about like what has happened like 10 years ago, but what's going on now. You want to use strong active verbs, nothing like too over the top. Like people say, like, like you'll see like in the tabloids in New York Post, like shocking or something like that. After rushing her 7-year-old daughter to safety, Anne Murray raced back to the dock, as opposed to ran back or something like that. You want to have like use verbs that kind of grab people a bit. Obviously, you want to like, this is emphasize the magnitude of the story. Stress the unusual, obviously talked about that. But you want to like basically show the impact, how it matters to people. Keep that in mind when you actually do those worksheets and you finish those up. because you want to show like what, especially that first one, the very first leader that you'll see deals with child abuse statistics. Really, when you think about that one, think about like what really like kind of resonates with people and matters to people and that sort of thing. Okay. Be objective and attribute opinions. I talked about that a bit. Okay. Attribution is a very important way of actually telling people like where information comes from. And I've talked a lot about like, making sure that like, you keep things simple. Okay. You want to again avoid things like exaggerating, obviously, because exaggerating is essentially lying. Um, like there's like colloquialisms like 2 cents to her son. I mean, like this is actually like an opinion. You want to avoid opinions in stories. Also, another thing I want to point out is I saw in some stories people using first person. First person is I, me, they. Okay, I'm sorry, not I, me, that sort of thing. Okay, you want to do third person. Basically, you want to be a fly on the wall. Okay, you want to be as objective as possible. So you want to use he, she, it, they pronouns for your stories, okay? And you want to keep it in that theme, that voice, okay? You don't want to insert yourself into the story. That's like another level up of writing. It's actually very hard to do. I've talked about it before. So you want to make sure that you actually, you write in a way so that you have some sort of distance between you and the story. You can write passionately, that sort of thing, and write about your passions, but you basically have to write in a convincing way so that there's no bias, okay? And in the way news is right now, it's so many times it's accused of having bias. So I want to try to avoid that. Okay. So this is the end of chapter 7 right here. And basically you want to avoid, I don't want you guys doing this, these assignments right here. Okay. Okay. And then chapter 8 deals with moral alternative leads. Okay. Basically this also deals with things like just it's moral alternative, basically like, different ways of approaching it. I don't want to really like, this is actually something that could be, I just want to give you guys an idea that there's actually other ways of actually getting into a story, and they actually require like more than one paragraph. Okay. Basically like what they would call essentially like an anecdotal lead. Okay. All right. So basically like, what they call a delayed lead. Okay. That's something you find in what a story that's actually like a writing to be read story, a story actually where you actually want people to read. You want people to read the entire sentence, okay, entire story, but most of the time they don't. Okay, so you want to write a lead that actually like will be a lead that actually will be I'm sorry, will be a lead that actually will get the news out as quickly as possible. Okay. We'll be dealing with alternative leads more actually when we do our feature assignment. Okay. I just want to really kind of show the contrast. Okay. So chapter 9 deals with the body of the news story. Okay. And this is what, again, we talked about. I talked about this last week, the inverted pyramid style. Okay. Where the most important stuff comes at the top of the story, and the less important stuff comes later. Okay. And then here we go again. Again, the lead, I mean, typically the lead actually, I know this is a very like big right now, but basically it comes, I can actually make this a little bigger. Oh, geez, look what I did. I didn't mean to do that. Oops. Let's go back. Okay. All right. So anyway, make this a little bigger. Not so much. I know there's a way to do it, but. Okay. Anyway, let me try to do this again. Sorry about that. Okay. So the lead basically summarizes the story, and then basically this is kind of, I showed you more of the kind of more specific structure before, but basically the idea again is that you're trying to show, you're trying to break down the story as it moves along. Okay. Now, basically, actually, what I showed you before would be typically how a more colorful, more detail-oriented story would be handled with the transition and the anecdote, that sort of thing. But actually, a lot of times when you deal with those stories, you don't get a lot of opportunities to go into that basic detail. So actually, it's just a lot of series of transitions. So paragraph 2 will be transition, paragraph 3 will be transition, paragraph 4 will be transition. Basically, one point to the next, answering the questions who, what, where, why, when, how. Okay. But the difference here is that the news story actually like would actually like go into the more, again, like more important details. What's the most important detail? Is it the who? Is it the what? Typically, like in a crime or an accident news story, it's the what happened. Did somebody die? That sort of thing. That's horrible. Somebody was severely injured. People want to know what happened. That will be like probably the most important first or second graph. Okay. Um, okay. You want to get, you know, typically, actually, it's just about, it's you don't want to necessarily. A lot of times, like a name is actually hard to pronounce. You when you write a story about somebody who actually got hurt, you don't actually typically don't put or an accident. You typically don't necessarily put the person's name in the first paragraph of the story because actually the names can be hard to pronounce and that sort of thing. You just want to identify like what happened. Get right into the story. Don't wait to get into the story. Get right into the story. See what happens. See if the person was severely hurt or whatever. Okay. Background, too much, too soon. Avoid devoting the entire second paragraph to background information, just like I was saying before. Second paragraph in the story is dull because it emphasizes routines, insignificant details. Okay, like here, like it goes into the whole background of what the Red Cross does after basically a story about blood supplies. We want to know if basically people are getting enough blood and they're getting hurt and they're dying. So let's get into that. Okay, let's not delay that. Let's not waste time. Okay, ending the story, very important part. Okay, I saw people write conclusions. Okay, we do not write conclusions in news stories. Okay, I know I don't mean to say that in a way where I'm kind of upset. I'm not. Okay, it's just you guys are told a typical way of how to do a news story and a certain craft. But basically, a news story does just actually kind of peters out. Okay, this is maybe a kicker, but maybe actually typically a news story ends with what they call a walk-off quote. Usually, like quotes are probably the lesser important stuff in the story, even though you kind of scatter them through the story. But maybe you should usually just end with a quote. Just basically say goodbye to people with a quote and put it in there, and you're done. Okay, just end it with that. That just you just basically a story just peters out. You don't, and if you do a story that basically like where you put in a conclusion, sometimes the conclusion is actually like identifies maybe some of the most important stuff in the story, and you shouldn't have waited till the last part of the story to get there because most people dive out of this story if they're not interested in the first couple of paragraphs. Okay, so you want to like actually get the important stuff at the top. Okay, this goes into more like transitions. Transitions actually again will actually like help guide people through the story, help move stories from one fact to the next in a smooth, logical order. Okay, as I was showing you guys before. And actually, like news reporters will do that actually often because what they'll do is they'll actually they'll actually help guide you through the news story. And what I'll do is because we spend so much time now talking about all this stuff, I'll actually show you a news video that shows that in the next lecture how a news reporter helps transition the viewer from one point to the next. And then usually what you'll see like the news reporter actually guide you through. So like this happened and and then they'll shift to people and interview, and that'll provide the anecdote to the news story. Okay. Um, but basically that's what a news reporter does is essentially guides you from one point to the next. Okay. The need to be fair, the need to basically stay objective, and that means basically keeping yourself out of the story and basically reporting things so that they're as objective as possible. Okay. All right. All right. And then, of course, the last chapter I'm asking you guys to read is actually chapter 10. All right. So let's go to that. Quotations and attribution. So again, this actually goes into a little bit of what I've talked about already. When to use direct quotations. Reporters use direct quotations when their sources say something important or controversial or state their ideas in a colorful manner. It doesn't mean like I'll see like stuff that's actually informational, that's actually important. Like I'll basically describe what happened at a crime scene or basically describe what somebody does in a job and somebody will put quotes around it. Well, that's actually kind of a lazy way of actually writing. Okay. What you want to do is you want to take the information you get from people and paraphrase it. Okay. Much of what they said. Okay. Because actually, it's actually a much more direct way of actually saying things. Okay. It's much more concise and economic way of actually talking. And actually, you want to like think of yourself as a professional writer. And the way people talk sometimes isn't necessarily like you want to write in a conversational manner, like the way people talk, but you don't want to like be like bound by that because that could just go on forever. Okay. Um, I actually want to pull up an example of a story where maybe like it was a little bit too much of a quotation. Actually, I think it was actually the copy. I have it right here. All right, so that's not actually. I'm sorry. So basically, let me make sure. What's her? I'm sorry. All right. This is actually kind of like a you got these ellipses right here. It's kind of an awkward quote. Maybe it doesn't need to say all this stuff. Okay, it's not the longest quote in the world. It's not the worst quote in the world, but this is my first time competing at a national level, and there are many incredible and strong lifters in my weight class. I mean, that's something that just could be said in a paraphrase. Okay, I would be ecstatic if I was placed in the middle. It's a privilege just to be here. Probably the only thing that's actually like a colorful that could be like used in a quote is here. It is a privilege to be here. That's it. Okay, the rest of it can be basically paraphrased. Okay. All right. And I bet I can make this written in a way so that maybe it's actually more concise. Roy said this is his first time competing nationally. It's a tough competition, and he would be ecstatic if he placed. Okay. So basically you want to like basically interpret and basically he said. Okay. You want to, so now this is much easier to read, right? It's like a straight sentence. Basically, Roy said, it's tough competition, he would be ecstatic. Spell ecstatic, sorry. Ecstatic if he placed. How many words is this? Get out of here. Not you. Okay. How many words is this? Word count. 24. Okay. How many words is this? Oh, please turn out okay. So I don't look stupid. 36. You cut off 10 words. That's significant. That's like a whole sentence, by basically using your own writing and getting more concise and to the point. Easier to read, more straightforward. And then this part right here, it's a privilege just to be here. It can become like a whole separate paragraph. Oh shit, sorry. All right. And like, basically give the reader a break so they can kind of take a breath. Isn't that much easier to read? Okay. You paraphrase. Isn't that better? Okay. All right. So, and then we talked about attribution. So basically you want to avoid that. I mean, I've seen people write like stories will say like, Roy said this, and then like about a 50-word quote. Roy said this in the next paragraph, and then another 50-word quote. That is such a lazy way of writing, okay? You want to basically use your own writing to interpret what people are saying, okay? All right. Obviously, you want to avoid defamatory remarks, where people make racial remarks, this sort of thing, unless maybe in a certain context, or maybe like there was a politician who made a remark that was inappropriate or whatever. So yes, but you want to avoid like giving I would say a platform to people who say things that are just incredibly stupid and insane. Okay. I mean, like, and just basically do nothing other than maybe like sensationalize, I would say. Okay. You want to like use quotations that will blend into a narrative, as I described before, with the transitions and the that sort of thing. It says there's also an issue with profanity. Okay. All right. So basically, you want, some organizations allow us, others don't. This book will talk about how it's maybe not such a good idea. That all depends. I mean, I will allow profanity being used in my news stories. Okay. So no, that's not a strict deal. Okay. Okay. This talks about, again, the difference between the importance of using attribution and when it should be used. I've talked about that. Okay. All right. And more about quotations and direct quotations. Identifying sources, basically like there's different ways of doing that. I mean, we don't really like go too deep into that in this in this class, but basically everything is basically on the record in this class, okay? I mean, there's been a few exceptions where I allowed things to be off the record, not off the record, but basically what they call background. But basically what we typically do is on the record sourcing. That's basically where you have a name, a full name, okay? Not just I've still had people like use just first names, and I had one story I graded where somebody just used somebody's last name. Okay, we got to use on the record means your full identification. It gives credibility to the story. It means that basically some person's willing to put their name to something. Okay, so on the record sourcing we use. There's something that's also called background, or without attribution. Okay, that's basically where it's like a source said. Okay, we don't typically do that. Okay, in this class, but that's something you use like when you go into like an investigation, or maybe like it's really kind of sensitive. All right, so like obviously a name wouldn't be used. Okay, so we typically will like use the person's name. Okay, off the record, if somebody tells you something that's off the record, you can't use it. Okay, but why is that useful? It's useful because maybe you try to get that information and then you turn around and you try to confirm it somewhere else. So that's why it's actually a good idea to actually like maybe you talk to somebody maybe off the record or something. You may run into that in some of the stories we do, okay? But but please just like don't like make that too much of a habit. Just like try to use that, maybe try to get that information, because we're just going to be writing stuff about like the weather and stuff like that here, or maybe like some maybe controversial stuff happening at school or whatever, but not much more than that. All right, so like I said, there was a lot to cover there. Remember what you got due. I will document that again in the alert I'll send out on Monday, and the whole thing along with this video, and so you're up to date. Remember, and then I'll have more details about what's due next on the next video, which will be on Friday. All right. Well, thanks very much, guys, and I will be talking to you.